So welcome to this panel, which will discuss the significance of space and the public sphere in art and culture. These notions play a fundamental role in endeavors to diversify audiences, to foster a larger understanding of art making, and to provide a more equal access to and participation in cultural in general. Art in public space and participative artistic practices are two relatively young formats which are still in the process of being reflected and positioned. Many artists, at my feeling, feel drawn to such practices as a way to relate to societal realities and take some sort of responsibility in political challenges. On the other hand, danger is there that such formats are being instrumentalized by politicians and in this way lose autonomy and its very specific communication level and meaning. Such practices should be clearly distinguished from social work. And therefore, participatory art and art in public space or in the public sphere will benefit from a reflected self-definition, such as Claire Bishop has also done already very well, as not to lose its specificity and autonomy. Questions and concerns should be addressed, such as how do we define those public spaces and how are artists dealing with the fact that public space is more and more privatized and commercialized? Who are the groups of the population that such artwork wants to engage and is defining them as marginal or underprivileged, as is often done, not a form of discrimination? Or, I mean, it feels sometimes for me really discriminatory. Where can endeavors for artistic redesigning of the public sphere meet with diverse cultures and valuable traditions and memories? Where is the thin line between artistic and social work, and how can the quality of participatory and in situ artwork be assessed? Yeah, well, like before, we do first we present ourselves. We have here Nadia Aguir of In Situ, based in France. Then Luca Ricci, Be Spectative, and Laëtitia Manach from DiverCities, who are leaders of projects which deal with these questions in quite diverse ways, and we can discuss some of them after together. I will just briefly start with a few words about the position of my own organization, CO2 Arts Laboratory for experimental music and sound art in Brussels, and we are one of the interfaces partners. So we, as a relatively small and research-centered arts lab, have addressed the topic audience development as followed. I mean, we have been, of course, this was a notion that came to us, and we have first reflected, really. We felt rather critical about the traditional idea, which often prevails in bigger cultural institutions, that audience development means more people coming to their events. So in a way, new public should be found among groups of society who are apparently not participating yet in culture. This is usually about specific so-called marginalized or underprivileged groups of the population, presuming that those have a lack or no access to culture, and we find that often this is a presumption which is not really true. For us, this approach has something, or can have something awkwardly like almost missionary sometimes, or at least patronizing, which didn't also fit with the good relations we have generally in our neighborhood in Brussels, which is a very diverse neighborhood. And this is, I think, this problematic that we formulated there is very closely related to questions of spaces in which presumably public cultural spaces, like the bigger institutions, often museums and so forth, are designed in certain ways, in such ways that they do not necessarily feel accessible or welcoming for everybody, for the public. And anyhow, CO2 as an arts laboratory, a large audience is not anything we aim for, so we felt our role in the context of interfaces should be the reflection of such thoughts and such critiques and the research and support of related artistic practices. The starting point was then that audience development for us should start with the curiosity for the cultures and of those other communities. On one hand, and on the other hand, the reflection of artistic practices which seek for a connection with other cultures, mostly via participative art practices. We did that via three main sorts of activities, hopefully complementary to those of the other interfaces partners. We had 11 residencies of artists who had responded to a call we have formulated, who explored sound, music, site-specific and/or participatory artistic strategies. They immersed themselves in a variety of spaces. Social, architectural, linguistic was very important for us, and cultural. And process was definitely more important than outcome in this case. Several went to their personal limits through a rather extreme leaving of their own comfort zone. And for us, this showed what it really entails, actually, to become audience in unfamiliar spaces, where one does not know the rituals or cultural codes, where space become somehow territories. I'm not going to say this too clearly because Caroline Profanta, my colleague, she's explaining this much more in detail this afternoon. Then we held 2 symposia, one on sound and participation with 12 artists and theorists who were reflecting this topic in a very quite diverse way. The other symposium was organized as part of one of the residencies and engaged with the question of ownership of ideas, which is also quite important in participatory art, where the line between audience and artist often become blurred and ideas mingle, and then it's not always clear anymore what actually is who actually is the professional, and in consequence, who should be paid, for example, is quite important questions, these. And then we closed the project with a festival to share the thoughts and the outcomes. And here, spaces was important because we went in very different cultural spaces in Brussels, where, well, other codes, other audiences, other music, really. And we really also tried to collaborate there. The festival was on the nature of sound, asking what is so specific about this medium, as with the regard to participation. Because I think really sound is such a medium that is very good actually for participation, because it crosses borders and limits in another way than the visual or any other sort of media-based art. And finally, we summarized some of the ideas which we had discussed and found through the project with the publication that we have some, so if you are interested, we can give them to you. About the specificity really of this medium we are using on sound as an interstice, we called this. And well, maybe I stop here. Our observation about this topic that without Christos we probably would have not addressed somehow, but it was really very interesting, and I think spaces were very, very important. And also what has already been said, the question of how do we measure quality? Is a process, a good process, enough quality, for example, over an outcome? And definitely the constatation that we somehow we are also some sort of policy makers, because we decide who we promote and so forth. So I think that was very right to say we should be much more curious and make the experience somehow on our own body to what it really means to go in, to immerse ourselves in other cultural codes and ideas, and like where art is transported by other communities. And I think, yeah, that is a very important experience to make, to be then able to also include other people in our spaces.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I moved to that one very quickly. So working on this project, Future DiverCities. I'm London-based and I'm French, as you will quickly spot with my accent. Future DiverCities is a collaboration of 9 partners across Europe, but also Canada. Key players in the field of urban engagement and new artistic forms. It's quite a nice way to put that in one sentence, but I have to say it's a partnership which is very diverse. We have one city council, we have one urban making agency, we have one tech agency, we have one more social innovation kind of organization, and we have a core group that is more similar, coming from the digital art sector. So I suppose, like lots of you that are working on European projects, the first part of the project is very much to deal with this diversity of partners and finding like a common, I mean, we have a work plan, we achieve something, we get the grant, but how do we actually do things that are meaningful and that are actually driven by the same sort of like philosophy and objective. So that's like really something very important to say. Also, I put that it's a 4-year program, it's also large scale. So like Ben said, yeah, it is 4 million euro, but it's also 4 years. And in our case, we got an extension, so it's 4.5. And that's like such a luxury because nowadays it's quite rare to have a funding that goes that long. And I have to say it's, especially when you deal with diversity and complementarity of partners, it's really great to work with that time frame of collaboration. And 4.5 years is really a very interesting time to explore together. In a nutshell, Future DiverCities looks at the ever-changing role of arts and culture in urban context through different aspects of it, but very much what sits at the core of the project is the city and the changing urbanities and the particularity of each city is involved in the project. And how can we think intervention of artists or creators that can be meaningful for the cities and that can also work with citizens, residents, for them to collectively make the city and shape the city. So I'll let you read that. I probably said most of it. I'm not going to talk so much about what the work plan is about, what we've done, and talking about example. I have a small video which I suggest we keep for the end if we have time. If we don't, it's not maybe so important. What I want to talk about this morning is to explain to you a concept or framework that we sort of used at the beginning of the project to help us like shape this collective philosophy or collective narrative of the project about what do we mean about culture in transformation, culture in new urbanities. And we worked with Charles Landry, so it's a concept he has developed, and we sort of like commissioned him and worked with him for him to develop this a little bit further, which is looking at the framework of cities. So as Milena said this morning, a little bit fancy, but it's a useful framework. So cities 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. And how do we progress against those concepts? I'm going to move directly to that and then come back. So I've put that together by myself, so no credit to Charles. If there's any mistake, don't go to him. But basically, this framework has been extremely interesting for us to position where we want to intervene. And also, I have to say, we are also looking at this framework as for our evaluation. So we have a researcher who is working using that and see where we sit with that. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to stand, if you don't mind, because then I can see. So City 1.0, City 1.0, I mean, those 3 approaches can be seen historically, but they are also somehow overlapping. So City 1.0, the references is very much the museum, the National Theatre, etc. So very much where it's here, it's the box, white box, black box, but it's very much the idea that you have venues or you have spaces where audiences are coming in and where there is a top-down approach of what is to be seen on stage. So there is a sense of curation and direction of arts, which is like putting on stage what, even if it's a collective curation, but at least there is like an expertise that is coming top-down. So very much based on the spectatorship notion of for audience engaging with the arts. What comes along that in terms of social system is much more, it's very much the a sectoral approach, so, and economy as well. So a policy for contemporary dance, a policy for circus, a policy for visual art. So something which is very sectoral. Economy of culture is like the basic production and distribution of culture goods. SITU 2.0 is coming a little bit afterwards, probably more in the late 80s or 90s, is the understanding that in cities, culture can actually embellish city. And culture can really be instrumental in growing local economies, but also attracting tourism. And so really using culture as or creative district or creative cluster as a way to change a little bit how the city is perceived. So that's the moment when Stark architects are very much dominant, like Frank Gehry kind of architects, of course. But that's also the European capital of culture. And in economical system, you see the spillover effects. So the recognition that actually, you demonstrate the value of art and culture through economical creation of jobs and economical spillover effects. I'm going fast because I thought I would be much quicker. And so the social system is very much tourism board, local businesses, and extra. What is very interesting in the cities 3.0, and that's where we are at the moment. Cities 3.0, the references are very much the creative hubs, the maker culture, something which is much more grassroots, something which comes much more from the communities. And it is, yes, something which is based on the collective intelligence, something which can happen because we have digital tools and digital way of participating in arts and culture. But I want to say as well that maybe we are moving beyond that to something which is also linked to resilience, something which is also dealing with climate emergency. And how do we really work at hyper-local level, which I put somewhere maybe, yes, hyper-local communities. So how do we consume locally? How do we make locally? How do we engage locally? Some examples of Extinction Rebellion, the way they work in London is quite very powerful at that level, with really a grassroots level. But also the economy which is attached to that is the collaborative, the sharing, and something which is maybe of a peer-to-peer economy. So what we've done with Future Diversity is very much exploring the 3.0 and very much exploring the dynamics between them, because what we face very much, and that's my last sentence here, is that obviously those phases come one after the other, but the infrastructure, there is an infrastructure for all of those. So whereas we do almost all have a 3.0 lifestyle and way of engaging with arts and culture and way of making culture and way of thinking about participation, as you said, Claire Bishop, this sort of level engaging with participatory arts, we do live with infrastructure, which is 1.0, 2.0, and they overlap. So what is very interesting when you work with arts and new urban spaces is to see how you are in a space or in a city that do understand those dynamics, and how do you really create fluidity between those systems. I have 1 minute, yes. In a nutshell, what we've done, and I'm not going to go into details here, our main activity has been what we call the artistic lab. I mean, lab is such a also a fancy word, which doesn't mean much things, but long residency with artists from different contexts and different expertise, engaging with residents and looking at specific thematics or topics linked to the city. Technological pollution, sense of belonging, sense of ownership, this kind of thing. So looking at different approach to themes. We've done an app, and we also have done community engagement and looking at working with more vulnerable audiences.
Hello. So In Situ is gathering partners who actually are supporting artists that have one thing in common. They look at public space as a means to make art. The network has evolved over the years from 6 partners in 2003 to today 20 partners and 8 associate partners in 19 countries. There is quite a diversity amongst the members, so we have big and small festivals, residency centers, places, organizations that have all year long programs. And it also makes a diversity in terms of places, because they are based in big cities or small towns, rural areas, even natural landscapes, which actually makes kind of a wide variety of playgrounds for the artists to work on. What we do is that we support artists. That's the core of what we do. And to do that, we have several programs that are covering all the steps of the creation. So we have artistic laboratories, specifically for the ideation phase or the production phase. We have transnational residencies, where a partner is sending an artist to another partner's place based on the relevance of the place for the project. We have co-productions and obviously mobility programs to help the partners welcome in situ artists during their festivals. We also have a MOOC and a think tank, but I'll come back on that later. What I wanted to highlight is that artists working in public space, they have a specific relationship with the audience, because this relationship is embedded in the fact that they are playing in public space. And this can happen during the performance, like when here the audience is supposed to participate during the performance, otherwise the project doesn't exist. But it can also happen during the creation process. We often have projects that are collecting materials, like interviews of inhabitants, videos, sounds, that will later be used for the creation. We also have a lot of site-specific projects, so projects that can tour everywhere, but every time they have to be presented in a city, they have to be readapted. Here, for example, it's a project of a German artist that is working on giant origamis, and every time he goes somewhere, the origamis are different because they respond to the history of the city. Then we have the usual suspect, the festival goers. Again, the specificity is the fact that we also reach passers-by, like people who went out in the morning and didn't think about going to see a show. And it's quite important for the partners, because in a way it's part of their strategy in reaching certain types of communities. Like the choice of the place where you put a project is never innocent. And it's also a way to reach different kinds of communities. From the understanding, we spoke a lot about what is public space, and this notion has evolved. Apart from unconventional spaces, meaning outside of a theater, the artists, they have invested new spaces that are not public but could become public, like old warehouse that will be reused for, I don't know, housing or something like that. Natural landscape has become, obviously, for a long time, but more and more we see projects like that. And the virtual space as well. That's a project of a board with arrivals and departures, but instead you have birth and death, and the audience is filling the board through an app, telling the stories of the people. And then to connect with the people, it's also easier to speak about subjects that are directly affecting them. So we see many projects about ecological challenges, migrations, democracy, and collective decisions. That has been part of the, like, many of the artistic projects that we supported for the last 4 years have spoken about, let's say, democracy. That's a project where, so it's a transparent pig, obviously. Inside you have a sign saying, this is a community fund, you can contribute to it if you like, and once you've agreed on how to spend it, you can open me and spend it. And it's not a project about money, but it's a project about what is making a community and how you make decisions collectively. Opening to new aesthetics also is something that enabled to reach new types of audiences. The network was very concentrated at first on performances and has opened progressively to different types of project. Visual art, gaming. So basically that's a football match, but instead of having 2 goals, you have 4 goals and 4 teams, but just 1 ball. And again, depending on where, which city it is presented, it will be up to the partner or to the organizer to choose how you gather or how you separate the communities. A lot of immersive projects for 1 person, a lot of co-creation projects, And this notion of transdisciplinary is important also because in the network we saw the evolution, and less we speak about disciplines. We have projects with dance, theater, music, visual arts, and more we don't speak about the discipline, we just speak about the project. It's not even in the vocabulary in a way. To get closer to the territories and the people inhabiting it, we also launched an experimental program called the Artistic Acupunctures, where the idea was to send artists to places where a certain issue had been raised. Let's say, for example, in Marseille, we worked on the place of women in public space. In Tárrega in Spain, we worked on the depopulation of the villages around the city of Tárrega. And the idea was that these artists had their poetic or artistic look on these subjects. And if you want to know more, we have on the website articles from a researcher who looked at all the artistic acupunctures. To finish, we also launched a MOOC. It was the first on artistic creation in public space, to speak about the history, but also the challenges of what art in public space is, and to better explain this kind of sector, which is not always really well known. Again, it was free. I know that most of the MOOCs are free, but it's also in line with the fact that most of the festivals that are part of the network have no ticketing, and it's also a question of accessibility in a way to let's say, to defend that and to assume that it's important. And to finish, I will speak about the shrinking of the public space, because for many reasons we've seen through the partners, through the artists, the fact that there is more and more difficulties to play in public space, to be in public space. Sorry. Either due to the fact that there is a rise of populism in certain countries, and as you were explaining in Hungary, for our partner, it's becoming very complicated to keep the festival. But also it can be due to reasons that are like security measures due to terrorist attacks that forced the partners to have many restrictions in when they implement a project in public space. For example, we have partners that have to, like they used to present a project on a square, and now they have to like close the door with the roads with fences, remove the cars, have security guards, and check the audience to enter the space. And in a way, it's kind of closing the public space. Or so what's the point of being outside if you have to close the public space? And this is important for the whole society, obviously, but also for the artists, because the artists working in public space, they kind of respond to what they are in, and it affects, and we see that in the different projects that are coming in the network, it affects also the way that they work and the way they think their projects.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you to the Onassis Foundation, to the partner interfaces for the invitation. I know very well you are now more waiting for the lunch than for my speech, but I will do my best for being more appetizing than I can, okay? So the name of the project I'm presenting you is Bispectative. My name is Luca Ricci. I'm a theater director and a playwright, and I'm also the artistic director of the project leader of this project. The name of the association is CapoTrave Kilowatt in Italy, in Tuscany. This is the second edition of the project, because the first was between 2014 to 2018, and we were refinanced again from the European Commission until 2022. The central idea of the project is to create a group of active spectators in each one of the venues of the cities involved in the project. What it means, the idea starts from a specific project we started 14 years ago in Tuscany, where we asked to a group of citizens, of local citizens, to be part of the selection of our festival. So they have the goal to select 9 of the shows to be presented among the 65 that are presented every year in our festival. Thanks to BeSpectactive, what we are doing is to create a large network in which, in every city that is part of the project, there is a group of active spectators. Our group is called the Visionari. So many of them, they have the same name, but many of them, they have other names. But the same thing, the same goal for all of them is selecting a part of the shows to be presented in the theater and the festival that are part of our network. So the fact that they have a specific goal is the important thing, because they are meeting every week, at least once a week, for discussing the different proposals that they have through public calls, so it depends. This is the partnership of the first, BeSpectactive, and this is now the current partnership of the second. So now we are in 15 countries with 19 partners, and we have also a big number of associated partners. I mean, other theaters or other festivals or venues where they are applying the same format, if I can use this word. So this is the list of the old and the new partners, and I don't have the list of the associated, but the small points, the small spots are the associated partners. In the second edition, we asked to these spectators to select 108 shows to be presented to the different audience in the different theater or cities where the festivals are based. So we co-produced 21 shows, and so you have some numbers that you can look by yourself. What we are doing now, we are asking to this, now we have 1,500 active spectators each year that are engaged in the project, and not only for one day, but at least for 10 months each. Because, as I told you, the meetings are a lot of meetings every week in every venue. So 222 shows to be selected and presented to the local audience by this group of visionary or active spectators. And as a network, we are also co-producing 50 new shows. And thanks to 60 periods of creative residencies, 2 weeks each. And during each one of this period, we ask to the artists to be in contact with the local community, as was said before. I mean, to be inspired by the stories, by the specificity and the characteristic of the local community. For instance, we had an Hungarian artist working on how change the life of the parents in the first year when they have the first child. So she asked us to meet 10 families in each city for having a day which each one of them for creating the new production. So these are the 3 main words of our project: co-programming together with this audience, co-commissioning, and co-managing the opportunities of presenting these shows. We are doing this training with our scientific team for creating in each theater a community manager, a person in charge for managing the relationship with all these different audiences that are activated during the 4 years of the project. Is of course a capacity building strategies to increase the internal competencies of the structures, and also for realizing a peer learning network. I was saying co-commissioning. What we are doing now, it's also to create a relationship, a link with 2 of these communities, and ask to them to commission to a specific artist, selected together, a specific piece of artwork in public spaces to be realized in both cities. So we have the meeting of these groups for focusing some themes that can be interesting for both communities. So this is an idea also for creating a relationship among these different groups, and then the residencies and the realization of this artwork. I was saying production, so we give to all the artists a research bonus. This 3 periods of creative residencies and the final residency in-house before the debut of the show. We have also a bonus tournée for buying the shows that we are producing, for giving the opportunity of touring to all these 15 new productions we are realizing. We have different level of investment, small, medium, or large scale, according to the number of artists that are part of the show. And the 45% of our 4 million budget is devoted to the artist. I mean, to the production, to their fees, to their travels, to their accommodation during the period of residencies. These are some of the productions we are realizing. I have no time for describing each one of them. You are very lucky for that. But as you can see, we are trying to focus the central themes of our moment, historical moment: democracy, ecological issues, gender, new generations. These are the new one, and so we are selecting meeting after meeting the 15 productions. So we have now selected 10 of them. We have the last 5 to be selected. This is the European Art Commission I was describing you before. These are the couple of cities working together for this commission. And there is also a strong focus on international conference, also for creating a strong discussion around the topic of active participation of spectators in the performing arts. So the next conference will be in Italy, in our festival, in the next July, in San Sepolcro. And these 2 are the 2 publications we did. You can download them by our website as bspectactive.eu. And so, yes, they are the results of the 4 conferences of the previous project. So we will have 2 new books at the end of this 4 new years. This is, I think, an interesting idea we tried to have for creating connection with the spectators. 1 day per year, usually in November, we have an offline and online event. I mean, all the groups are together in their venue, but they are all linked thanks to a Facebook page. So they are trying to answer to the same 3 questions for half an hour for each question. And thanks to this Facebook page, we can read in real time the answers coming from Lisbon, from Göteborg, from CBU, and also to relaunch the same topic to the local group of spectators. So it's also for giving them the feeling to be part of, to all those 1,500 people, to be part of the same network, to be in contact with each other. And yes, and another idea we had in this second edition is to select every year a cultural influencer, a person that has a big number of followers in the social media, and we are asking to them to follow all the aspects of the project meetings, the debut of the shows, the meeting of the active spectators, the residencies, and to relaunch, to tell what is happening in this network to his or her followers. And it's an interesting way for joining, for reaching new people that are very far from our structure, from our organization. I think that's all. Thank you very much.